Hey guys, so we're back and we're going to be working on the puzzle validation function. So this should be a bit more interesting because now we get to do some stuff on the back end. Um, and yeah, so basically what we want to do is when the user um, completes this form, we want to take their results and send it to the back end. So once we hit the submit action, we need to go and send that to the back end, check the solution, and if it matches the solution, return success. Otherwise, we need to return which letters were in the correct place. So let's get cracking. Okay. So in my project currently, I've got a bit of it should include a hello world function, and this just gives you an example of how to code it up easily. And essentially, this is just using a little util in the background that I called create on call function, which is just creating a Firebase function that uses on call. So on the front end, we can then go and just call it. This stuff over here is just an abstraction, basically, that stores the types correctly. We have a little bit of a functions map here, which we use to keep track of the data, so the inputs and then the response, the outputs for each function that we have in our project. And it also just does some basic error handling. So if this bombs out for any reason, it's going to throw internal error. So that's all that is. And how we use that on the front end is we go and I think we've got the Hello World example over here in the Firebase API folder. It's quite simple. Basically, we create the callable function with another util that I've made, and that also does the same thing. Keeps the type information and just creates the function for us. But really, the only thing that changes over here is this over here. We change the function name. You can see it's complaining because ASDA does not exist here, and that's just why it's typed up like that. And the only other thing, if we wanted to make a function called, what would we call it? Validate puzzle. We would update it there. We would also update the function name, and that's it. And now we have a callable function. We could essentially call this in our code directly, just doing something like over here. So maybe on our onSubmit, we could go await validate puzzle and pass in whatever inputs it expects. Or we could use our data query approach, which is the stuff you set up with hooks earlier. And that's what we're going to do. But I just wanted to show you how you can quickly wire it up. So I'm going to convert this existing code to the function itself. And then this one, I'm going to rename validate puzzle and actually move it validate puzzle and actually move it to the puzzles domain, puzzles API. Cool. Validate puzzle, nothing else to do there. We will replace that with something else later. We don't need you anymore. We will need to update this. And then this one over here, I'm just going to call it validate puzzle. And update the file name too, and we'll also pop it there, update that. So now you can see how the types are all linked. This util is also checking that the puzzle exists. So we just do that, and boom, we have our function. We just need to make sure we're importing that in the index file, because when we deploy, everything in here is going to be deployed in the functions package. So that should all be working. Let's just pretend that this is our hello world function still, just to make sure that it's all working. And yeah, so when we call this function, take the name and say hello name, return that. And that's all that function is doing at the moment. Add it there. Validate puzzle. We don't need to update this yet, but we will need to update it here. No, we're getting that from puzzles now. And we're probably missing the param now. Yeah. Let's say name, my name's Shaun. And I'll take the response. And what does that look like? We can see it's already typed up over there. That's why the types are also handy. Because just by providing a little, name of the function and updating the data and response, we automatically get everything typed up nicely. And yeah, so let's see what that looks like. We obviously need to restart the server. Unfortunately, the emulator doesn't pick up newly added functions, so we have to just restart that. Wait for it to start up, and then we can test it out. Takes a while. Boom, cool. Start that up. Let's hit submit. I'm just gonna quickly enable that button. So I'm hoping that says hello Shaun. Woohoo! So it worked. So basically it's we've clicked the submit action. It's called the validate puzzle function on the client, which is actually called the callable function on the back end. I hope that all makes sense, but that's the gist of it. So now all we need to do is sort of update our inputs and responses, and then add the core logic here. And of course, convert this in the app. We need to convert it to a query. We don't want to use it directly because we want all our fancy loading states and global config and all that. So I think let's do that first. We'll go. So this is not a query. This is going to be a mutation because we're making some sort of action, and we did create a mutation when we created the sign anonymously hook. Wow, my mouth isn't working today. Okay, so use validate puzzle. I don't know about you guys, but I keep on seeing pizza. I must be hungry. Okay, so validate puzzle. What puzzle validate? Really? That was a huge dyslexic moment. I definitely am hungry. And that's all we have to do to get the mutation working. To use it in the code, we are just going to go mutate. In this case, we want to. So you can either React query either gives you these. You can do a mutate validate puzzle equals use validate puzzle. So you could call it like this. But you won't be able to wait for the response. So this mutation is going to be synchronous. So if you had some side effects, you could wait for the data that way. But we want to wait for this to complete and then show a toast. I think. Do we want to show a toast? Okay, let's just imagine we did. Now, all of a sudden, we could take that response, wait for it here, and then go toast. So that should work. We can remove that API call now. And let's give that a quick test. Woohoo! Hello, Shaun. And let's just let me just illustrate that mutate async a bit better. So, how can we do that? We can go and look at the loading state. Is validate puzzle loading? If it is, I also want you to show loading state. And let's just see what happens if we just use mutate directly. Is it gonna be... And if I use mutate directly, oh yes, okay, that was it. So I can't go ahead and get this data from here, the response, that is. If I use mutate like this, I think the data, you have to use it, yes, we get the data like that. So then, you know, you could do something like validate puzzle response, use effect, if validate puzzle response, show the snake bar. Yeah, something like that. But I don't really like that pattern. So I'm going to stick with the async, keep it like an async function, and handle it like this. I think this is nice. Oh yes, we're not going to do a toast. We're going to, if there's success, we're going to navigate. Ha, I knew there was a reason. So if there's success, we'll navigate. We'll just say to do SS, update this. And SS is just me, by the way, Shaun Taker. I'll just, if you're on a team, it's usually quite nice to prefix, postfix to do the to do with your initials, just so we know who needs to tackle it. Okay, so I think that'll work. Does that work still? Something's, oh, it is working. It's just not doing anything with it. Cool, so let's just disable that button again. We know that our function is working. Now we can actually get cracking with the logic. Keep that open, we can close that. I want you open, close you. The types, so I think let's start with the types. With our puzzle, what do we need? We are gonna need we're gonna need some sort of input. We'll need, I wonder if it's gonna be better to do the input. So we currently store it as letters. So puzzle state has an input of letters that represent each word. When we send it to the back end, do we send a sentence or do we send that same API? I think I might keep it simple and just say expect a string, like a yeah, R spar with my little r. That will just simplify things. We'll keep it as a string, and then we probably need to send the puzzle ID as well. The backend could infer it, but let's just, because the backend could fetch today's puzzle, or we could just be explicit and send the puzzle ID. I think I like that. And then we will also, we got the input. Right, we wanted to know if the hint was used. So if the hint was used, we will send it up. And if it's true, we'll set it on the data. If it's false, we'll just ignore it. We also want to know when the puzzle was started. So date started string, which will just be an ASO string. Let's just make that explicit. And we will provide that pretty much every time we call this puzzle, but if it, and then we'll save it to the user result, but only if it doesn't already exist. I think that'll work nicely. Date started, hint used. I feel like there was something else. Date started, hint used, and attempts. Oh, the attempts we track on the back end, so that's cool. Every time we call this function, we'll increment the attempt. Okay, I think in terms of the data, that should be fine. The user ID we can infer from whoever called the function. The response, we should move on to that next. So we'll probably do like is success, Boolean, and we will also return correct letters. String array, do we want to either return a two-dimensional array, so something like that, or we could return, I'm just wondering, because now we've said we're going to send in the input is a string, and we want to return correct letters relative to that input. But we don't really want, do we want to return a string back? We can't. It has to be a two-dimensional array, because if the Y was the only correct letter, we have to use something like that. With a string, we can't represent that. We can't go spar with model R. So two-dimensional array it is, and we need to update our input just to match that API, I think. Let's get Copilot to match that. Spar model R. Would that work from our UR? We can just take puzzle state and map out the letters. When we receive the correct letters from the back end, we can just update it directly. So that actually simplifies things for us a bit too. I thought using a sentence would be simpler, but no. That'll work. Input, and then anything else? Just looking at my notes. I'm just wondering what else we need to return. It's really just correct letters. Yeah. And then we need to think about the max attempts. So we have like, the user can only has 3 attempts. They can only call the function from the client 3 times. And then the function should also check that as well, just to be doubly safe. I'm just wondering if the function ever needs to return if they've crossed their max attempts, or just return nothing. I think maybe just return false and blank correct letters. Awesome, cool. I think that would look good for our data types. So how does that look on the client? We're gonna go, so we'll start on the client and then we'll move to the backend logic. We are gonna need the responses. Yeah, let's handle the input first. So for the input, we're gonna go const input equals puzzle state dot map image dot letters. That'll give us our two-dimensional array. String, did I say string array? No, there we go. I was gonna say. Okay, so that'll give us our input. What else do we need? We need our puzzle ID, which will just come from the puzzle ID, puzzle data dot ID. And at this point, if we don't have puzzle data, just to make this type safe, do we want to throw or return? At this point, we should never get here without puzzle data, but if we do, let's surface that error so we're aware of it, because this will push it to Sentry. Yeah, let's rather be safe there. The other option is just going return, but then if it's an actual issue and someone does encounter this, they're going to hit submit and nothing's going to happen, and I think that's a worse user experience. At least with our error, we show them error state, we send it to Sentry, all good. Okay, so we've got puzzle ID and input. We are going to need to send date started. Date started. And that is just the ISO string, which we need to get track over here. And I don't think we ever set that up, because we said this is part of our logic. So let's go date started, set date started, use state. Yes. We are going to do, we need to, like, sort of when the page mounts, set that time, get the current time and set it to date started. But I think it will be a good place to do it over here, where we wait for the puzzle data to come in, and then we set up the state, and then we can also set up the date started. I think that's a nice place to be doing it. And we'll just go use our date, which is using day.js in the background, and just get the ISO string. Cool, so we'll have that, and then we can just simply pass it in here. But we should also just be doubly sure, because it could be an empty string. So let's actually make that we'll go string or null, and this is just making sure that everything's set up correctly. So date started might be a null here. If it's null, throw an error, because I want to surface that. I want to be aware that I've cocked something up somewhere. And yeah, hint used, we're going to use that after all, and luckily we've already done that. We are using an atom because we decided that, oh yes, okay, we need to get this from the result data. So I think let's just replace this atom with state. We don't need that. And then we'll pass this directly in here. And that's got all our inputs. So let me just finish up that hint used logic. So hint used is going to come from result data. Hint used, easy enough. Time taken is basically going to be the date, current date, dot diff. Wow, you're amazing. Not puzzle data, result data, date started. So cool. Nice and easy. I'm just wondering if we need to memorize this. It's probably not such an expensive function, so we can just leave it as a constant there. To explain that a bit better, typically if I have a constant living within the render part of a function, I will try and memorize it, but only when it's like an expensive operation, like an array operation, for instance. So filtering, mapping, sorting, use a memo, but otherwise I will kind of just leave it as is, because it may be more expensive to use the use memo in that case. So I think this is one of those. We'll just leave it as is. Everything should still work nicely. Not getting any errors. We can get rid of use hint used. No longer need you. Thank you. And good to go. Okay, so validate puzzle has our inputs. What do we do with the outputs? We're gonna get, we have our types kicking in automatically, and we need to look for is success, and then if there isn't success, we need to set the correct letters. Actually, I think in both cases we can set correct letters. So let's go. We need to set the response of correct letters to puzzle state. If success, navigate to puzzle success, else show error toast. Do we want a toast or dialogue? Maybe just a toast for now. Okay, let's see. Copilot, help us out. Can you figure this out? Const new puzzle state. Woohoo! And then we'll set it. Puzzle if response dot success, navigate, else toast dot error, incorrect answer, please try again. I believe our client side code is done. We just set up some types. We then went and called the function using a mutation on the client. Once that submit button is not disabled anymore, of course, we also added some loading state. Submit disabled should take this loading state into account as well. Now that we have a mutation loading and general data loading, is loading doesn't make sense anymore, so we'll just go is, let's go here. I want to go is data loading just to make it explicit. And we don't want to show our skeletons in our closet when our mutation is loading, which is basically our validate function. When this is loading, don't show the skeletons. So that's all that was doing. But when we are validating the function, we want to disable submit again and show some loading state. Cool, so that's all good. Should work nicely. I mean, obviously, this is all needs to be updated, but I think in the next video we'll tackle that. Awesome. I've got to say goodbye in Arabic now, so ma salama.